So, I'm going to talk about layering colour, so you get that really beautiful, rich depth of colour that you can achieve with colour pencils. I'm using my usual Faber-Castell here, Polychromos. These are oil-based, and that does have the advantage that they don't form that wax bloom that you get with lots of other pencils, and they're really lovely and soft to work with. I've sharpened it to a fine point, and I'm going to finish this circle just by gently trying to keep an even pressure. Render in the first layer, which is a yellow colour. Notice I'm not doing this action, I'm actually doing oval shapes or little circles, trying to apply an even pressure. The smaller the circle, the better really. Okay, so there's a layer of yellow. I'm now going to add another yellow, an orange colour on this one. And I'll start over here, and I'm going to add another fine layer of colour here. It's not about applying lots of pressure, it's about building up those layers so you can get a richness, because pencils are translucent, so some of that yellow will shine through, giving a luminosity to what you're drawing. I'll just carry on for a little while. Sometimes if you turn the paper, it's easier when you're doing a curved shape. Just try and keep that pressure as even as you can, again avoiding this up and downy or left to right motion, and going in circles to avoid as much as possible lines. I just do half of it roughly. It's really quite satisfying doing this, it's quite meditative in a way. Keep going. Okay. There you are. So maybe I could graduate, maybe I could get darker at the top here and graduate down to the bottom. Just by going another layer. You can do many layers with colour pencil. It really is amazing how many layers you can add. So here you see it's starting to really pop now. So I've graduated this little test with some more layers of orange and graduated like a vignette down to a pale. I'm now going to take a red pencil and add even more layers. There's 3 layers on here now, so this is the 4th layer. And I'm going to start to apply some real pressure now. And the effect of all of these layers is to just make the colour so saturated and vibrant, because I can still see some of that yellow coming through, which gives this sort of a lightning effect. Okay, down here. You see here, you can definitely see the yellow still shining through. Still using my circles. And you can just keep going back. Sometimes when you've applied so many layers, it does rather give up. You've filled in all the basic dimples and ruts in the paper, and it starts to skip across the surface. But if you use a little bit of fixative and let it dry, you can then just carry on and add a few more layers. Okay, so what I might do then is just get my yellow again and just re-establish some of this yellow down the bottom. You see how that really starts to really sing. The colours are so rich and deep. That's what I love about coloured pencils. And it's such a lovely, lovely feeling, and you can actually see it sort of happening before your eyes. That's what I really love. Okay, so there you are, there's a sort of effective layering. Sometimes you hear artists talk about burnishing. Burnishing involves going over a colour with a white pencil. It's not an opaque white, so you're not going to cover. It has a blending effect. So if I do that, for instance, here, it sort of blends the colours together, and you can't see it's filling in more grain of the paper, and sort of blending all those colours together just a little more. It does dull the colour a little bit, but if you want that sort of smooth effect, there you are, that's burnishing with a white pencil. I'm using a Luminance permacolor pencil here, made by Caran d'Ache, which I think is the best white pencil. There are others. Okay, so even when you've burnished, if you think I've dulled down my colours a little bit, you can go back again and put the colour back again. So versatile, such a joy to use. I've never been able to do this sort of thing with paint as easily. I just think colour pencils are just so marvellous to work with. See the colour, the brightness is coming back again. Another way to smooth out lines or visible lines in your colour pencil is to use this stuff, which is odourless alcohol. I use a brand called Fragonard, made by Pebeo. It's not expensive, odourless mineral spirit, sometimes called OMS, and a simple one of these, Q-stick. So dip in, you don't want loads and loads, and this is going to melt the colours together, so you actually get rid of all of that texture. Don't do a scrubbing action, it's dabbing action, and can you see it's melting away those layers into a wash. It looks much more like a painted wash when you do this. It evaporates all the time, so you finally have to keep recharging your Q-tip. You can do a little gentle persuasion, but don't scrub too hard because you're in danger of damaging the surface of your paper, and that would be a disaster. So dab away. There you are. So that's really blended now, and it looks much more like a painted surface. Okay, now that takes a surprising time to dry. You can aid it with a hairdryer, but if you do that, sometimes the paper does sort of cockle up a bit, so I'd rather leave it. But interestingly, if it's still wet and you add some more colour, the effect is astonishing, because it's melting your pencil as you draw, so it becomes very intense, look, and melts in. You have to be quite careful, it can get a bit messy. But just to do real touches of vibrance, and then I could go back with my Q-tip, just melt in what I've done there. So what's happening there is, as you're using your pencil on the slightly wet mineral, it's melting away. So there you go, there's an interesting effect that you can get just with coloured pencil. If you saw that, I defy anyone to say that that's done with a coloured pencil. It's quite amazing. It's just another example of how amazingly versatile coloured pencil can be. So what I'm going to do next is show you how to do negative drawing with a stylus, and also using magic tape to remove pencil from a surface. So now I'm going to show you how to remove colour for effects, light effects, or maybe there's an error. You're never going to actually get right back to the paper, but you can certainly do a lot to recorrect values and shadows and highlights. I'd like to mention the use of black actually, because in colour pencil drawing we can use black because it's a translucent black. In painting I would very rarely use black because it sort of tends to kill everything it stands by, but with this I'm going over with black on this dark blue indigo background, and you can still see the blue through the black, so black becomes quite a rich colour in fact, which is odd. And again, if I go over the black with red, can you see I always do my shadows using black and a colour, usually the colour of the object that is casting the shadow, and it's a really interesting rich effect. So using black with coloured pencil is perfectly acceptable. You can actually go quite deep with the black. Okay, so I'm now going to remove some of this colour using various techniques. A really good one and a fun one is actually using this stuff, which is just blue tack. You probably recognise blue tack. It comes in many colours, some stickier than others. I like the white stuff. Okay, so I'm going to just form it into a sort of a rough ball, and by pressing and lifting, makes a satisfying pop as well, you can remove colour. It doesn't last very long because clearly you can see the pigment is transferred to the blue tack, so you're not going to use that on another drawing because you'll just put the colour back, and you can get quite a long way. And then what you can do, you can use this maybe to as highlights and re-establish that, maybe a sharper edge here, a sharper edge there, a darker side there. And I often use this for rays of light or little areas of highlight, or sometimes little tiny sparkly areas in the in an eye, for instance. I just love colour pencil. I use an orange to warm down here. Again, you can see this is over black, so the effects that you can get are quite amazing. Okay, another way that you can remove colour is by using my favourite toy, the electric eraser. Here's my electric eraser, and this has got a medium hard rubber in it at the moment. You have to be quite careful not to damage your paper surface, but you can get quite interesting effects drawing actually using an eraser. It does create lots of debris, so again my handy brush, I can brush my work to keep it clean, and then you can very nearly get back to the actual paper, so you can actually correct mistakes. So that's the electric eraser. Another way which I don't use very much is magic tape. I put some magic tape on, and again you can see the colour is lifted off. You can cut this to shapes, or using a stylus you can draw lines in it or whatever shapes to selectively, quite accurately remove areas of colour. So there are several ways that you can add highlights, draw into coloured pencil, correct errors, or just actually to create certain effects. So just to recap, we can use blue tack, there's blue, there's white, we can use an electric eraser. These can be bought reasonably cheaply. This one is a more expensive model, but I love it. So there you are, there's another way of creating effects in coloured pencil. Another way of laying down colour using the not so humble coloured pencil is to use a tea strainer. It does need to be a metal one. This one has a handy little cup, and can you see there's some powder in the bottom there? And I'm going to use this powder and a Q-tip to lay down a very soft, subtle wash of colour. So this is the bit I don't like because it feels very wrong to me, but you're going to grate away your pencil. Sorry. There you are. And underneath it there, you can see I've got this fine powder. So using a Q-tip, I can pick up some of that powder and apply it like a painterly wash really to the surface of my paper. I've started here. I'm not a big fan. I like the effect that it has, and I'm going to have to try and practice using it, but I can't control it completely, and I'm a control freak, so it's hard for me. But I must admit, you can get some really lovely effects, very soft. You couldn't get it another way. You couldn't do this using the pencil, and you really don't get any lines at all. It's lovely, and I can carry on building up the layers. I'm trying to make this thing look, I suppose, a bit Christmas bauble-y, I suppose, a little bit 3D. The colours are not so intense. It's always going to be a very soft effect, but I suppose if you put some fixative on there, let it dry, and did another layer, you could actually build up some intensity. It's a bit messy, again, doesn't make me happy, but I'm going to use my brush very carefully to clean down. So that is another method, using powdered pigment to apply colour to a page. Look how amazingly versatile this tool is. Love them. Another way of mark making you've seen me do before, using my trusty stylus and then colouring over. What I'm doing here is I'm actually incising textures into the paper, and then when I apply pencil skimming over the surface, it's intaglio, so it's going to bounce over those lines and it's going to show through white. Very good for highlights, for texture. I'm just going to do something a bit random here. I'm going to just draw some shapes, and then maybe I'll try and use that powdered effect that I did before to see what it looks like. Just going to draw some wibbly lines. Here you are. And then I'm going to get my powder and a Q-tip and see what happens. Quite a subtle effect, but can you see it's starting to come into view? And there you can see, I hope, pattern that incised into the paper shining through. I think it works a little better if I actually use a pencil. You've got to be very careful, obviously not to press too hard, because you will colour in your carefully incised lines. It's a good way of, as I say, creating texture. I use a lot when I do fur, tiny little highlights in glass perhaps. It's quite effective, and it will take quite a lot of colour layers, so you can really make those incised lines really very visible. So if I put some red over the top. There you are. Okay. You can even maybe sort of darken certain areas and leaving others light. You can use your eraser tool to make it even more textured. I'll brush down. So there you are. Lots of examples of how to use coloured pencil. I'm sure there are more. If anybody out there knows more that I don't know about, always happy to hear about that, and I'll have a go. Thank you for listening. Look at my blog, The Pointy Pencil, and I'll see you soon. Bye.